All right. Well, good morning, PTS dogs. Uh, got a good one this morning, and it's going to take a few minutes to get through. But a common question I get is, how do I get a PTSD service dog? And there are some steps to take, and it is a process. So I'm going to discuss that with you this morning. First of all, anybody who uses any kind of service dog has got to use the service dog to mitigate the symptoms of a disability, period. If you are not considered medically disabled by a medical doctor or a psychiatrist, you cannot use a service dog. Service dogs are not an excuse to take Fifi the Wonder Poodle everywhere you want to go just because you don't want to leave your dog at home. A service dog is, for all intents and purposes, a piece of medical equipment used to assist a disabled person with their disability. So let's get that out of the way first and foremost. You must be disabled to use a service dog. More specifically, if you want to use a PTSD service dog, you've got to have a diagnosis of PTSD as a disability. You can't just self-diagnose and say, well, I have PTSD, so I need a service dog. You've got to have medical documentation to back it up. And I'll get into the reason for that in just a second. But first step, you must be disabled to use a service dog of any type. More specifically, if you have PTSD, you must be diagnosed. You must be under some form of treatment. And the service dog is part of the treatment for PTSD. It is not a cure. There is no cure, but part of the treatment is using a service dog, and that can be a very, very beneficial part of the treatment for PTSD. So, you have a diagnosis. You are disabled. You're receiving some compensation or not, but your doctor or your psychiatrist says this is a problem. This limits your life activities. Then it's time to decide if you can use a service dog, if you want to use a service dog. I say decide if you want to, because it is the disabled person's choice whether or not to use a service dog. You can choose to use a walker or a wheelchair if you are suffering to some degree from disability in the lower limbs. The same way with the service dog, you can choose to take all the medications that the VA throws at you, or you can choose to try using a service dog and get through with as little medication as possible. And a service dog is definitely a way to reduce the amount of medications that you have to take for PTSD. We'll talk about that in a minute. So, I want a service dog. Well, if you start looking out there to buy a service dog, you're looking at anywhere between $20,000 and $35,000 easily to purchase a service dog. That's a lot of money, and I don't know about any of you, but I certainly can't come up with that kind of money off the top of my, piggy bank. It's not there. Most of the time, if you're disabled, you're on a limited amount of income, and so purchasing a service dog is not a realistic goal. That being said, if you are a veteran, there are a great number of 501c3 organizations in the United States whose sole purpose is to help provide service dogs for disabled veterans, which touches back to the diagnosis and a piece of paper from the doctor that says that they recommended you use a service dog. All of the 501c3 organizations that I'm aware of require a note or a letter from your doctor recommending that you use a service dog to help treat your PTSD, mobility issues, whatever. If you want to get a service dog and you're a veteran, you've got to have a letter from your doctor if you're going to these organizations. So that's step 2. First of all, be diagnosed. Second, get a letter from your doctor recommending that you use a service dog. And your doctor will have a discussion with you about it. There's some things you need to be aware of if you're going to use a service dog. First of all, no matter what kind of dog it is, when you walk into a place with your service dog, you are automatically a center of attention, period. I don't care if you're walking a 100-pound Malamute like I am, or if you're walking a 30-pound mutt. You walk into a store with a dog, people are going to pay attention to you. People are going to stop you. People are going to talk to you. People are going to inappropriately distract and talk to your dog. So be ready for that. Be aware that that is one of the outcomes of using a service dog. For me personally, using Skeeter, the fact that he's a very gregarious animal and the fact that he's a very unusual animal to walk into a store with actually pretty much cured me of my social isolation. Because although I wouldn't give you the time of day or talk about the weather before I started using him, I can talk about my dog all day long. And that opens up venues, it opens up avenues for much more conversation. And all of a sudden you find you're able to socialize again. That's one of his tasks. Okay, no, you're disabled. You have a note from your doctor. You decide to start looking for an organization. There are a lot of them out there. I can't name them all, but I am going to name one. To my knowledge, the largest service dog training organization in the United States for veterans is TADSAW, Train a Dog, Save a Warrior. They do it free of charge to the veteran. And although they're based in San Antonio, Texas, there are TADSAW trainers throughout the country, in every state, I believe. So that's a place to start, is go check out tadsaw.org, TADSAW.org. I'll put the link in the comments. There are a lot of others. Pause for Patriots, Pause for Soldiers, Battle Buddy Foundation. There's a lot of them. Google service dogs for veterans in my area, and you'll come up with 2 or 3 organizations right off the bat. You go to the organization. You go through their application process. Now, here's the drawback with that. Couple of drawbacks. First of all, most of them have an incredible waiting list, TADSAW being the exception, and I'll get to that in a minute. Second of all, there are organizations that will train you and your dog together, which I call cooperative training. That I highly recommend. The reason being because when you train your service dog, you form a bond with that dog, and especially in the case of a PTSD service dog, that bond is absolutely vital. Skeeter and I would not be as successful as we are as a team if I hadn't had him from birth, if I hadn't grown up with him, and if he hadn't learned what my stressors and triggers are throughout his entire life. We wouldn't work together. He now preempts me. He preempts stressors. He distracts me before I even know there's something that's going to bother me. That wouldn't have happened if he hadn't been there and we hadn't worked together and I hadn't trained him through the whole process. I hadn't gone through that with him. So I recommend you find an organization if you use an organization that helps you train the dog, not that trains the dog for you. Another thing to look at is there are some standards out there, and there's one called ADI, Assistance Dogs International. I don't like it. ADI standards basically require your dog to be a robot, especially in the case of psychiatric service dogs, and more specifically, especially in the case of PTSD service dogs. Your dog has to be able to function with a level of autonomy and a level of discernment. Your dog has to be able to intervene with you in what's stressing you before it becomes a full-blown anxiety and panic attack. If the dog's trained to be a robot, that doesn't work real well. I'm not saying that ADI standard dogs aren't great. I'm sure they are. But I know for myself, when I'm in a situation where Skeeter's intervening because I'm starting to spin up and lose control, I'm in no state of mind to say, oh, come give me deep pressure therapy, I'm freaking out. I'm past that, but, actually he intervenes before I get there. But you know what I'm saying. If you're in that state of mind where you're going into a full-blown panic attack, you don't have the presence of mind to command your dog to come alleviate your symptoms. Now, the other set of standards I think is far more reasonable. First of all, it allows a dog to be a dog. And second of all, it allows for the way that the ADA is written, and that's the AKC standard Canine Good Citizenship tests. There are 3 levels, and then the public access test. TADSAW is an organization that uses those standards, and I believe very firmly that those set standards are absolutely perfect. Now, the other route, if you don't choose to use a training organization, you have the right under the law, under federal law, to train your service dog yourself, should you desire. You have to know that you're able to do so. The only reason I believe that I could take on the task of training Skeeter to be a service dog is because I grew up in Alaska with snow dogs. I'm familiar with the breed. I'm familiar with their proclivities. I'm familiar with the trouble with them. I'm familiar with the good points and the bad points. And I've had enough time with a leash in the end of my hand that I felt confident that I could train my dog. I still took him to the Canine Good Citizenship class at PetSmart, which is the AKC standard, and got some tips. Really, my trainer was really excellent and kind of gave me a push in the right direction. But you can train your service dog yourself. There's a lot of resources available out there on the internet. I get people asking me training tips all the time. If you do choose to train your service dog yourself or use an organization, I really highly recommend positive only reinforcement. I cannot express enough how highly I recommend positive only reinforcement. Why? Because you want your service dog to respond out of a desire to please you, not out of fear of what happens if he doesn't. It's that simple. Do you want a dog to be scared of you, or do you want a dog to respond out of love and caring for you? Skeeter has never been legitimately punished. He's never been hit. He gets chewed out a lot, but he chews me out a lot too. That's part of the relationship we have. But he's, it's never. I've never used a pinch collar, shock collar, none of that. I have a 100-pound Malamute who's bred to pull. Who doesn't pull? Every dog can be trained. So if you choose to use an organization, remember you have to have a diagnosis. You have to have a letter from your doctor. You've got to find an organization. If you choose to train yourself, don't hesitate to reach out for help. The PetSmart dogs basic citizenship training, they go all the way up through advanced citizenship. They give you an access test, a citizenship test. That's really great. And at the time I took the citizenship training with Skeeter, it only cost $125 for a 6-week course. I don't know if it's the same cost now, but it's very inexpensive. Another route you can go is to find a trainer locally who will help you, and who will come to your house and give you personal lessons. I've known of several veterans who have done that, and it's worked very well for them. And it helps, you get a little bit of agoraphobia and some isolation going on. That's a really helpful thing you can do. Again, it's far less expensive than $25,000, $30,000, $35,000 to buy a trained service dog. Quite frankly, unless you have an inheritance sitting around, I just don't see it as being realistic for pretty much any disabled person to go out and buy a service dog. Let's see. I've got people making comments, dropping in some resources. TAGS, TAGS, apparently is a great service dog organization. Soldier Dogs for Independence in Evansville, Indiana, another one. Service Dog Express, another one. Like I said, there are hundreds, maybe thousands of organizations out there. What you want to look for when you're looking for an organization, first of all, I can't stress enough, cooperative training. Go someplace that's going to train you and the dog together. Second of all, when you ask how much is it going to cost me, if they don't say it's free to you because you're the veteran, walk away. There are thousands, hundreds, maybe thousands of organizations out there that are doing it free for veterans. So if they want to charge you, say thank you, I'm going to keep looking and find somewhere else. Again, TADSAW, I recommend you look at TADSAW first. They're nationwide. They just graduated their 722nd team. In 7 years, they've cranked out a little more than 100 service dogs a year. That's pretty impressive. 103 a year, as a matter of fact. That's pretty impressive. And their program works. Their training philosophy is one I'm wholly for. I'm 100% behind, which is, again, positive, only reinforcement. And I can't say enough. I met with Bart Sherwood, the founder, and he's a good guy, and he really has a good heart for veterans. Okay, so how do you get a service dog? First of all, you have to be disabled. A medical doctor or a psychiatrist has to tell you that you are disabled. Second, you need to get a letter from your doctor if you're going to use a training organization. If you're not going to use a training organization, you're going to train your dog yourself, you don't need a letter. It will come in handy later, but you really don't have to have it if you're going to train your own service dog. Third, if you're going to use an organization, find one in your local area. There are a lot that cater to veterans free of charge. I recommend Cooperative training, not a place that's going to train a dog, bring you in for 2 or 3 weeks for a crash course in handling and kick you out the door. Doesn't work that way. So working with a service dog is a process. It's continuous, always training. Skeeter's 6 years old, 6.5 years old, and I still consider every outing a training opportunity. If you train yourself, I do recommend that at one point or another you spend a little time with a professional. Either bring a trainer into your home or go to the PetSmart classes. They're inexpensive. They're a great way to get your dog out and get it socialized. And finally, trust your dog. You put all the time and energy and effort into training that animal. Trust your dog. Learn to listen to your dog. And that goes back to that bond when you train the dog yourself, either cooperatively or just on your own. The bond you create with your dog allows you to trust your dog. And if you can't trust your service dog, the service dog isn't going to be of much service. You build that team through building the bond while you train. And that team, that symbiosis, is absolutely vital. It's absolutely vital. I will post a few links into the comments, and thank you for shouting out to some organizations out there, folks. I'll give you the link to TADSAW. Any questions, as always, feel free to ask them. Message the page. You can drop them into the comments on the video. I go back and look for several days on end. That's Training Tips Tuesday for today. I hope that answered some questions. If you have any more questions, feel free to send them in. I will get to them as quickly as possible. That's all for now. Good luck, and if you have any questions, need any help, give me a holler. PTS Dog out.